The Norse monster. In the ritual, a group of friends travels to the forests of Sweden to honor a friend who passed away. During the hike, they decide to take a shortcut through a remote part of the woods, but they soon realize there's something deeply wrong with that place. Strange symbols appear carved into the trees. They discover an abandoned cabin, and the feeling that they're being watched becomes stronger and stronger. The film gets it right by refusing to reveal the creature too early. For most of the story, it only appears in brief glimpses, hidden among the trees or watching the characters from a distance. That creates an incredible amount of tension because the audience never knows exactly what's hunting the group. When the reveal finally comes, the wait is worth it. The creature known as Motor appears before Luke, the protagonist, revealing a design unlike anything viewers were expecting. Inspired by Norse mythology, it combines human and animal features in an incredibly disturbing way. The Crawlers. In the descent, a group of friends sets out on a cave expedition, but everything turns into a nightmare when they become trapped underground with no communication and no obvious way out. What's most interesting is that the film spends much of its runtime convincing the audience that the cave itself is the real enemy. Then comes the big reveal. As the group searches for an escape, one of the women uses a night vision camera to see better in the darkness. For just a few seconds, a humanoid creature appears behind one of the women before attacking her. The reveal of the Crawlers works so well precisely because it happens when nobody expects it. Up until that moment, the movie seemed to be nothing more than a survival story against nature itself. Suddenly, it becomes clear that something is actually living inside those caves. The creature in the basement. In Barbarian, everything begins when Tess discovers that the Airbnb she rented has also been booked by someone else. That stranger is Keith, a man who's already staying in the house. Despite the uncomfortable first impression, they both decide to stay. The problem is, the house is hiding something far worse. The major turning point happens when Keith discovers a secret passage in the basement. It leads to underground tunnels that seem to stretch on forever. When he disappears while exploring them, Tess decides to go looking for him, even though it's obviously a terrible idea. She makes her way through the dark tunnels and finally finds Keith. He's lying on the floor, terrified and completely in shock. All he manages to do is warn her that something is down there with them. Then comes the reveal. A gigantic, pale woman appears with a horribly deformed appearance and movements that are unnaturally fast for someone her size. Within seconds, she lunges at Keith and kills him while Tess watches, unable to react. It's one of those moments that catches the audience completely off guard and instantly changes the direction of the movie. What's most interesting is that the mother wasn't designed simply to look frightening. Her appearance and movements were inspired by Grendel's mother, a figure from the legend of Beowulf, one of the oldest epic poems in Western literature. The Ocean Monster. In Underwater, we follow Nora Price, an engineer working at a drilling station located at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, one of the deepest and least explored places on Earth. After a series of accidents destroys the facility, she and the few remaining survivors must cross the ocean floor in search of a way to escape. The problem is, they soon discover they aren't alone down there. For much of the story, the characters are hunted by strange humanoid creatures emerging from the darkness. It seems like those monsters are the film's main threat, but everything changes during the third act. As Nora tries to reach the escape pods, she notices that hundreds of those creatures are gathered around a massive structure. Suddenly, the enormous mass begins to move, revealing something far larger hidden behind it. That's when a colossal creature emerges, so enormous that the entire station looks like a toy by comparison. Little by little, its tentacles appear, followed by its gigantic silhouette and the unmistakable details that reveal its true identity, Cthulhu. The scene doesn't rely on jump scares. Instead, it creates terror by reminding us how insignificant human beings truly are when faced with something beyond comprehension. The True Face. In The Wailing, a small South Korean village is struck by a series of mysterious deaths. At the center of the story is Jong-gu, a clumsy police officer trying to figure out what's happening. As the events pile up, all suspicion falls upon a mysterious Japanese man who lives alone in the mountains. For almost the entire film, one question remains. Is this man truly responsible for everything? Or is he simply being used as a scapegoat? That uncertainty is exactly what makes the reveal so powerful. Near the end of the movie, a young deacon decides to confront the stranger inside a cave. The conversation begins in a surprisingly calm manner. The Japanese man doesn't shout, threaten him, or even try to escape. Quite the opposite. He toys with the situation and questions the young man's certainty. After all, if someone walks in already convinced they're standing before the devil, is there any answer that could possibly change their mind? But little by little, the mask begins to fall. His eyes change, that his human appearance disappears, and the creature finally reveals its true nature.
Myself.
The Pale Lady In Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, we follow a group of teenagers who enter an abandoned house and discover a mysterious book filled with horror stories. The problem is, those stories begin coming to life. One of the most memorable involves a boy named Chuck. He becomes trapped inside one of those stories where he finds himself wandering through a hospital and quickly realizes he's become the star of a living nightmare. The environment changes, and he's soon pursued by a figure that seems to have stepped straight out of a childhood trauma. That's when the pale lady appears. At first, she doesn't even seem particularly threatening. She moves slowly, almost politely, as if she's simply watching him. But that's the movie's trick. When she finally gets close, her appearance destroys any remaining sense of safety. A bloated body, pale skin, and a horrifying smile. What's most interesting is that this creature doesn't need to run or attack in the traditional sense. She simply dominates the space around her. The discomfort comes from the way she plays with Chuck, as if she's testing his fear before doing anything else. She then embraces Chuck and absorbs him into her body. Pyramid Head. In Silent Hill, Rose da Silva takes her adopted daughter Sharon to the mysterious town of Silent Hill after the girl begins experiencing sleepwalking episodes connected to the town's name. On the way there, Rose gets into a car accident and becomes separated from Sharon, leaving her trapped inside the town, which completely transforms whenever it enters the other world, a twisted reality filled with fog and grotesque creatures. Pyramid Head's first appearance takes place during one of these transitions, when Rose and police officer Sybil Bennett become trapped inside an industrial room. The environment is already collapsing around them, with peeling, bleeding walls as creatures known as creepers invade the area. Sybil manages to lock the heavy metal door, temporarily stopping them from getting inside, but the real threat is waiting on the other side. Then, Pyramid Head appears. His appearance is terrifying. He drives his enormous blade through the metal door, nearly striking both women. Then he begins forcing his way through with his bare hands, determined to break inside. Sybil opens fire on him, but it has almost no effect. The moment only ends when the other world itself begins to fade away, and the creature disappears back into the fog. The final smile. In Smile, everything revolves around psychologist Rose Cotter, who begins witnessing patients take their own lives shortly after claiming they saw a smiling figure. From that moment on, she spirals into increasingly disturbing paranoia and hallucinations while trying to understand what's happening. The climax takes place at her old childhood home, a place already filled with painful memories. Rose arrives there completely broken psychologically, believing she can finally confront the source of it all. But the film makes one thing very clear: there is no simple cure for what she's facing. The entity then gradually reveals itself, almost as if it's testing the limits of her sanity. First, it appears in the distorted form of Rose's deceased mother. It's a direct psychological attack. Then the creature begins shedding that appearance, literally tearing off its own skin as if discarding any attempt at a disguise. What's left is something incredibly tall, thin, and made entirely of exposed flesh. The most disturbing detail is its mouth, an endless smile made of layers upon layers of teeth and jaws, as if something were always smiling beneath another smile. An empty shell. In Under the Skin, everything revolves around a woman played by Scarlett Johansson, who is gradually revealed to be something far from human. She drives around Scotland trying to blend in with ordinary people, luring men into intimate encounters, where she sends them to another dimension to be killed. The film never over-explains anything. Instead, it traps you inside this cold observation, almost as if you're watching someone trying to learn how to be human. The turning point happens in an isolated forest after she abandons civilization once she begins developing empathy. She can no longer maintain the human life she had been imitating. During an attack by a lumberjack, he through her skin and reveals something impossible. There's no flesh, no blood, only emptiness. From that moment on, everything falls apart. Alone in the snow, she removes her disguise completely. The wig, the skin, the human form, all peel away. Beneath them is her true appearance. A smooth, dark body with no face or recognizable human features. It's not a traditional monster. It's absence itself. The horror comes from how alien it feels, especially when she looks at her own human face as though it belongs to someone else. After that, she's attacked and burnt alive by the lumberjack, bringing the sequence to a brutal and melancholic end. The shark. In Jaws, all of the tension revolves around an invisible predator attacking swimmers in a small coastal town. From the very beginning, nobody can clearly see what's causing the attacks. There are only remains, eyewitness accounts, and fear growing stronger and stronger. The shark becomes almost an idea before it ever becomes a creature. Its first clear, full-body appearance happens around the 81-minute mark, when Police Chief Martin Brody is aboard the boat, dumping buckets of bloody chum into the water to lure it in. The tension is already unbearable, with everyone expecting the worst. Out of nowhere, the shark emerges behind the boat, massive, its jaws opening just behind Brody. It's a shock because, up until that point, the film had carefully avoided showing the creature in full. Brody freezes for a moment, completely speechless. Then he slowly backs into the cabin, never taking his eyes off the water, as if he can't believe what he just saw. Still in shock, he delivers the iconic line,
"You're gonna need a bigger boat."
And to make the story even funnier, during filming, the mechanical shark malfunctioned so often that the crew could barely use it properly. That forced the movie to hide the monster for much longer, and accidentally created one of the greatest suspense sequences in cinema history. Without the mask. In Predator, Dutch leads an elite military team sent on a mission deep in the Central American jungle. What seems like a routine operation quickly turns into a nightmare once they realize they're being hunted by an unknown creature. One by one, members of the team disappear while the enemy remains nearly invisible thanks to its advanced cloaking technology. For most of the film, the Predator is shown only in brief glimpses, always hidden behind its mask and sophisticated equipment, making its true appearance one of the movie's biggest mysteries. The reveal comes during the climax. After surviving alone and setting countless traps throughout the jungle, Dutch finally confronts the creature face to face. At that moment, the Predator willingly gives up part of its technological advantage. Seeing Dutch as a worthy opponent, it chooses to fight him directly. Then comes one of the most famous scenes in the entire movie. The alien raises its hands to its helmet and slowly removes the mask. For the very first time, we see its true face. The design was unlike any other movie monster audiences had seen at the time. The creature has reptilian and insect-like features, along with 4 external mandibles that open around a mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. Its small, deep-set eyes make it even more unsettling and intimidating. Dutch's reaction became legendary. The first time he sees the alien's face, he delivers the unforgettable line,
"You're one ugly motherfucker."
What many people don't know is that the Predator's original design was completely different from the one we see in the film. It was supposed to look much more insect-like. The famous mandibles were added later, helping create one of the most iconic monster designs in movie history. The Pale Man. In Pan's Labyrinth, Ophelia is a young girl who moves with her pregnant mother to a military outpost in rural Spain. Amid an environment filled with repression and violence, she discovers an underground world where the Faun gives her a series of tasks, suggesting she may be the reincarnation of a lost princess. During one of those missions, she must enter a hidden chamber alone to retrieve a key. With one very clear rule, don't eat anything. She enters an underground dining hall that looks like something out of a strange dream. An enormous table is covered with perfect food, untouched fruit, and delicious desserts. Yet the room is silent, frozen in time, far too beautiful to be safe. Seated at the head of the table is the Pale Man. He remains perfectly still with a deformed body and loose, pale skin, the most unsettling detail. His face has no eyes. His real eyes rest on a plate in front of him, but Ophelia breaks the rule and eats 2 grapes. The Pale Man slowly awakens. He rises to his feet and picks up his own eyes, placing them into the palms of his hands. From that point on, he can only see by holding his hands in front of his face. The chase begins. The Pale Man moves with slow, cracking motions while killing the fairies trying to help Ophelia. She runs desperately and uses the magical chalk to draw an escape on the ceiling, barely making it out alive. The Summoning. In 1988's Pumpkinhead, everything begins with a father devastated by the death of his son, who decides to seek revenge at any cost. He travels to an isolated cabin deep in the woods to summon a demonic creature capable of hunting down and killing those responsible for the tragedy. The ritual is performed by a local witch who agrees to help in exchange for a blood pact. But first, he must retrieve a corpse from an old cemetery surrounded by a pumpkin patch. Back at the witch's cabin, she performs the ritual using the blood of both father and son to resurrect the body from the cemetery. From that moment on, the atmosphere changes completely, as if nature itself were reacting to what had just been awakened. The creature slowly begins taking shape, first an enormous silhouette, then long, twisted arms, until its signature grotesque pumpkin-shaped head finally emerges. The creature rises like a heavy, ominous presence. From then on, Pumpkinhead becomes an unstoppable force, driven by this supernatural bond, turning revenge into something impossible to control. The practical effects in this scene are incredibly impressive. Everything was created without the use of CGI, using only cable-operated animatronics. And speaking of revenge, on your screen is a video where we show horror movie victims who got the best revenge. Click and watch it. I'll see you there.